Hello and welcome to FACT's webinar called Botanicals and Tips for Natural Livestock Management. Our presenter today is Dr. Hugh Karreman. I am Larissa McKenna, FACT's Humane Farming Program Director, and I will be moderating the session. So thank you all for being with us. All right, so before we get down to business, let me just take a minute or two to give a few quick introductions. Food Animal Concerns Trust or FACT. We are a national nonprofit organization. We are headquartered in Illinois, but we do work across the country. And we work to ensure that all food producing animals are raised in a healthy and humane manner. We accomplish this by supporting humane farmers, such as everyone on this call, promoting policies that make food from animals safe and healthy to eat, and also by helping consumers make informed food choices. So along with my wonderful colleague, Samantha, who you see on this slide, I run FACT's Humane Farming Program, and we have the joy, the honor, the pleasure to work with livestock and poultry farmers from all across the country. We have grants programs, scholarships, personalized materials, mentorship, and of course, training and webinars on a variety of very interesting and fascinating topics. So I invite you to visit our website, foodanimalconcerns.trust.org, to learn more about these opportunities and all of our other farmer services and everything else that FACT has going on. So with that, I am delighted to introduce our esteemed guest speaker, Dr. Hugh Karreman. Hugh is a 1995 graduate of the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine. He's a dairy veterinarian and an independent educator of organic veterinary medicine. He's an internationally recognized expert in the non-antibiotic treatment of infectious disease and the non-hormonal treatment of infertility. So we're really lucky to have him with us today to speak all about botanicals and tips for natural livestock management. Without further ado, Hugh, I'm going to turn the floor over to you so that you may get started. Take it away.
Thanks very much, Larissa, and good afternoon to everybody. I hope it's around your lunchtime. I saw somebody is out in their lambing barn. I hope that's going well. I thought let's see, you gave a very nice introduction of how I have been as a veterinarian, and just thought I'd let people know that I'm also, well, I'm still a licensed veterinarian, but I'm also mainly farming now. And that's one of our Great Pyrenees. We have 8 of them. We have about 30 to 40 Jersey cows that are A2, grain-free, grass-fed. Milk once a day. We share milk with the calves, so the calves always are on the cows at least 12 hours, if not 24 hours, for the first 5-6 months of their life. And we also have hogs out in the woods that root around, and poultry for eggs. We stopped doing broilers. And we also have a flock of sheep that are St. Croix, so they're a meat breed. And anyhow, my wife, Suzanne, and I have 300 acres down here in Saxbahaw, North Carolina. And I saw there's a couple of North Carolina people here. And I want to say a special hello to Kathy Arnold out there up in New York. I hope you're seeing some green grass pretty soon. We're already grazing down here 1 to 2 hours a day, probably getting on 4 to 6 hours real soon. So wherever you all are in the country, thanks for being here, and let's get started, Larissa, on the slides. Or am I supposed to do that? No, you have it. Wait.
Did you want to share your presentation? Otherwise, I can share it for you.
Where is the presentation? How do I just get it going again on the PowerPoint there? There we go.
Okay.
Yeah, we got it. So
I think that you need to share. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then you can share your screen.
Let's see.
That button at the bottom.
Hold on. Sorry about that. Nope. How am I getting back to you, Larissa? I just have my screen.
So do you see, are you on the Zoom screen?
Well, it's got many windows on it. I apologize. We just had this going here 2 minutes before you started up here. There we go. Okay, here we go. Yep. Can you see my screen now?
No,
Now? I just shared it.
you did. No, it didn't share.
Okay, hold on.
There we go.
Yay.
Got it.
Okay. All good? Kind of. What about that taskbar up there?
You're all good, I'm pretty sure.
Is that taskbar? Okay. Well, anyhow, I would like to focus this talk on mainly botanical approaches to livestock. And as Larissa said, I've been a dairy veterinarian for many years. However, as I just mentioned, I've been working directly with sheep and poultry and hogs in the last 6 years since I've been down here in North Carolina. So I'm going to have some general thoughts about how to treat livestock, and some may be more specific to dairy, but are transferable to other livestock as well. And some will show specifically for hogs and sheep, perhaps poultry as well. So let's see here. Okay. So first of all, formula for healthy animals, and this would be your best vaccination program out there. If you don't use vaccines, that's fine. If you use vaccines, that's fine, of course, too. And thinking from the certified organic world, which I was in for a long time. But if, regardless of prevention with vaccines, you really, and this is kind of preaching to the choir, I know, you need to give a lot of fresh air, the access to the inside or outside of the barn when it's nice weather. I'm not saying like up in Quebec when it's, snowing and blowing hard to have the cows outside, but on a nice clear day when it's just snow outside and a nice blue skies and crisp, it'd be really good for the animals to be outside in the fresh air for their lungs, to not be in stagnant air. And of course, you need dry bedding for wherever they are, especially on the humid East Coast. And then one big thing is conventional agriculture has been really big on divorcing the animal from the earth. And, that's a big thing for all of us in the alternative or the regenerative world, is to have the hooves of the animals or the claws of the poultry out on the earth, scratching and rooting and grazing. And of course, eating a species appropriate diet. And then, of course, clean water. So you can see the hog down there drinking from a water tub. You can see that large black there at Rodale, where I used to work for a couple of years, bringing fresh feed to make its nest for when it was about to farrow, which is pretty cool. So let's see. How do I move this along? Okay, I got to figure it out, Larissa. So anyhow, this is also, again, preaching to the choir, but mainly that management. If the closer you can mimic Mother Nature, the better, healthier animals are going to be in. So, having calves on cows, having lambs on ewes, having, the piglets with the mom instead of always separating them away like conventional agriculture often does, if not always. You're going to have healthier animals. Also, when it comes to flies, I remember in Lancaster County, a lot of tie stall barns, but they'd have tunnel ventilation. And, that's kind of mimicking Mother Nature in the sense that on real windy days, there really are not fly problems out on the cows for the most part, or on the animals. And so if you can have tunnel ventilation when the cows are inside, that's a good thing. And of course, as farmers and human beings, and scientists, the first rule actually in science is to observe and, observe, adapt, and then be guided by what you see. Conventional agriculture is very much wanting to be in total control of the animals. And, in the alternative world, we want to work with the animals and listen to what they tell us. And of course, we don't want to have too much animal density under one roof. Otherwise, you're going to need the crutches of the conventional sector, which we don't want to be doing. So here's, 3 types of products that help support the immune system. And the reason I have that support the immune system is simply because that's everything. The animal's vitality, if you will. And, the regular person knows what vitality is. It's the expression of health and vigor. And the closest thing to that in the health world, the health realm, would be the immune system. That's the physical reflection of vitality, or that is the reason there is vitality, part of the reason. So we want to have treatments that support the immune system and not just knock out infection with a sledgehammer, but we want to be able to have the immune system win the battle and be treating early on. So there's biologics that are basically either passive antibodies, those 3 bottles you see of injectables there on the left. One is actually the Bovaseras derived from cattle that have been hyper-vaccinated against certain diseases that are called gram-negative diseases like E. coli, mastitis, and whatnot. And it works very well for certified organic cattle that have a hot coliform mastitis or maybe really early pneumonia. And then the BioCell CBT there's other colostrum whey products. Impro is another brand that is derived from cows' colostrum, from cows that have been vaccinated for specific bugs. The clear bottle down there is called Amplimune, and that is a nice general immune stimulant. There's two branches to the immune system. One is the specific immune system, where there's IgG and specific antibodies, which the 2 upper bottles kind of address. And then there's the non-specific immune system, which is like our firewall, like between us, that says I am me and you are not me. And there's like interferon and those kind of compounds. And the Amplimune down low is a great one for especially young stock against scours. You can use it in lambs, you can use it in kids and calves to stimulate their natural immune system. Eggs are really good. Also, sometimes old timers, as we all know, would put an egg in with, let's say, electrolytes if there's a calf or a kid or a lamb with scours. And that you want to use free range eggs from your own farm, hopefully, or local, so that those animals that are creating those eggs have the antibodies against the challenges that arise on that farm. And then we have botanicals, the echinacea up there, we have kelp, and we have garlic, and salves made with calendula, and then homeopathics. So we're going to focus on, after this slide, on the botanicals. These are some of the products I just talked about. And this slide presentation will be available to y'all after this session, right, Larissa?
Correct,
Okay.
it will be. Yep.
So if we look at botanicals, I mean, we're dealing with animals that are, farm animals are obviously one with nature. They're out on the land, they're eating things, but what are they eating? They can be eating just like what we feed them. And even in, real conventional controlled agriculture, ruminants are being fed a forage-based ration. Granted, it's kind of packed with energy to make milk or put on meat and that kind of thing. But out in nature, I mean, you can see animals eating just about anything. And as farmers, we all have seen that. Doesn't take much observation, but like, yeah, the monkey there up in the upper left, that's a picture from a friend of mine from the Netherlands who was in Africa, who's a zoopharmacognosist. And so she studies what animals eat in nature and why they might go to these plants that are not typical feed. And so that monkey it's in the springtime, and that plant is high in tannins. which are just generally good to kind of spasm the gastrointestinal system to expel parasites. So plants high in tannins are really good for that. That horse down there is eating bulrush. I don't know why, but it is. So why not, as long as it's not toxic. And the other thing about plants, even if there are some toxic plants in your pasture, if your animals are eating well enough and they're not starving, they won't, first of all, they won't go for the toxic plants per se. And even if they had a nibble of them, they probably won't be negatively affected. So, just because like horse nettles out in a pasture, now granted, they don't like to eat that, but if they were really starving and they ate horse nettle, they would get toxic effects from it. But normally, as you know, they leave it alone, or even milkweed has some minor toxic effects. But if there's grazing around it, they won't eat those milky, sappy type leaves, or at least not right after they try one or two. There's a Holstein eating from a willow tree, which is the willow is the basis of aspirin made by Bayer way back in the late 1800s, and it has salicylic acid. And you can't see beyond that Holstein, but there's about her whole rest of the herd is sitting on the hill chewing cud in the sun. Why that animal is chewing from the tree, it has a sense to do that. And goats are great, of course, for eating more shrub forbs. And, most animals don't eat natural chicory. Goats will. So it's interesting, when animals are, they're grazing, they're eating plants and everything, and they're sniffing things real close to their nose, and the olfactory system, or the scent system is really deeply ingrained in almost all land terrestrial animals, including like lizards and turtles and whatnot. And it's really interesting because it plants or the scent and memory are inextricably connected. And for instance, and it's scientifically shown. For instance, here's a sycamore, and as a kid, I used to walk to elementary school every day for whatever 6-7 years, and then junior high next to that, up the street lined with sycamore trees. So and I love the smell of sycamore, and when I sniff a sycamore leaf, anyone that's done this knows what that smell is. Well, that smell sends me right back to elementary school days, and it's really kind of cool. Here is mimosa, a very heavenly, really like kind of scent like lang lang is, just wonderful. And what's interesting is when you're around plants and they're, the sap, and you can taste plants as well, a little nibble, keeping the taste at the front of your tongue will tell you if it's a tart plant, a sweet plant, a sour plant, mucilaginous. And even if you don't know the name of a plant, like actually now I know that's Asian lily, but that's got a very unique scent itself. So I used to go around my house in my yard when I was still in Pennsylvania, and there were some plants I just didn't know the names of, but as I took in their scent when they were in flower, I got to know that plant. And it's kind of interesting because then I also think that when we lean towards a flower and really get its scent, it also kind of gets to know us. And so it's a very strong connection between our scent ability, our smelling ability, and also the fragrance that the plant puts off. So it's interesting. There's the doctrine of signatures in the botanical world. And so you can see like carrots, if you take a cross section of carrot real thin, you can see where people in the old days thought maybe it helps the eye. And, it's high in vitamin A, carotenoids, and it does help eyes. And so we can get a clue as to what might help us, even if we don't know the name of a plant, like let's say if we're sniffing some fragrant plants, we can get a clue to know what helps us, like the chambers of the heart there and the tomato. I had open heart surgery actually about 7 weeks ago, so that picture gets my interest right there. And then also the grapes that look like the alveoli or the air sacs within the lungs. So they can help reduce asthma problems and increase moisture in the lungs. When you have too much dry air, you need that moisture, like a humidifier, but you can eat some grapes. So here's a herd of cows up in Lancaster that are grazing, according to the NOP rule and all. They're certified organic cows, and you can see that they are reaching for underneath that grass. The proverbial grass is greener on the other side of the fence. And if you look closely, I can't really focus or close up for you, but some of those plants on the other side are definitely weedy, and not technically, just animals will eat any kind of vegetation if it's not mature, if it's not headed out, if it's green and succulent and proteinaceous, they generally go for it before it goes to seed. And that's okay. It's good for animals to have a good diversity in their diet, browsing, grazing, instead of just getting this homogeneous, total mixed ration, like a lot of conventional farms do. So here's a pretty busy slide, and I'm not going to go over it all, of course, but I just want to show you that if you look at the left-hand column for alfalfa, this is a typical readout, on a nutritional lab analyses of alfalfa. And compared to weeds, so to speak, you can see that a lot of the weeds that animals will nibble on are actually more nutritious in various, not all the things against alfalfa in comparison, but in various things. So if they're nipping at some dandelion greens or some chicory greens, okay, or comfrey, they're getting, roughly better protein than they would if they're just eating alfalfa all day. And if you look at the net energy per lactation, it's about halfway down the rows. 0.65 that alfalfa shows is actually for cattle, or lactating cows, the number you want or higher. 0.60, definitely no lower than that, but 0.65 is good. But look at dandelion, it's 0.85, chicory 0.65, comfrey 0.69, and so on. And so, general nutritionists will just tell you, don't, spray your weeds, get rid of them, go plant, whatever, some monocrop. I don't know. I don't think they could be more wrong. And I think a lot of people on the call would probably agree, but here's some proof. My friend Jerry Bernetti from Agrodynamics, he passed away 6-7 years ago by now, but he did some analyses of plants, and I'm glad he did, because it's not all bogus type feed. Here, these are pictures I took when I was doing nutritional work for grazers in Lancaster County to make sure they were grazing at least 30% dry matter intake, because a lot of their farms are very small and they all have like 30 or 40 cows, and they wanted to make sure that they were getting 30% or greater. And so I was out in the pastures a lot, and these plants, especially lamb's quarter in the upper left, that's got a lot of calcium in it. So if you do a Brix reading on that with a Brix meter, or a what do you call it, one of those meters that measures sugar in Brix, anyway, you'll see it's a very blurry line when you're looking at the sap of lamb's quarter, when you mash it up and you take a drop of it, and that means there's a lot of calcium in it. Smooth pigweed, cows love that as well. And if cows like it, I'm sure sheep and goats like it too. Not that I've watched them eat it per se. This little foxtail field was 2-acre field that the farmer put about, his milking cows in it overnight. They demolished it overnight. Foxtail's not something cows really eat. The lower right picture is spiny red root pigweed, and that's kind of a nasty plant, and it grows in pretty fertile soils, actually, usually near barns and barnyards. But actually, if you look at that picture, you don't see the seed heads, and the seed heads kind of come up and they kind of, bend over because the weight of them, and the cows will come by and eat them off. And actually, in the old days, they used to use them as a natural, well, back in the old days, back in the 1800s, they used all plants for, as, instead of calling it natural, it was just what they had. Anyway, for wormers. So maybe when the cows are eating the seeds off the spiny red root pigweed, they're looking to have some, internal cleansing going on. So this is an interesting little quote from Nova Scotia Extension Service. When you're grazing animals, and I believe strongly in management intensive grazing, first day the paddock is their dining room. The second day that they're in the same paddock, it's their living room. And the third day, it's then their bathroom, because they're making it all messy. So you want to keep moving animals as much as you can. Try to mimic Mother Nature, as I said earlier, in that, the cattle in the middle of the country would go from, we'll say, Texas and Mexico up to North Dakota and Saskatchewan. As the summer got hotter, they would go north, and then as it got colder, they would come south, and they were never ever trapped in a perimeter. And so, your farm, no matter what the perimeter is, 7 acres, 70 acres, 700 acres, treat it as like its own little, organism, and have animals always moving through. And one of the main reasons is obviously to rest the paddock that they've been on, but also not to destroy it, and to allow regrowth, and also to minimize parasite accumulation, which we'll get into, I think, pretty soon here. Larissa, I'm not looking if there's any questions yet. I don't know if there are. I see. Oops.
There actually are. I'm not sure if
I'm looking at them.
you are
Everyone
okay.
can see them.
they're kind of all over the place. So I don't know if there are any that you want to take right now, or do you?
Let me I might as well, because I'm about to get into parasites. So let me see what we got. Protective botanicals for avian flu. I know my wife uses against botulism, she uses an apple cider vinegar and honey mix, drenched, a lot, frequently during each day, but I don't know how you can, well, you'd put it in the water system, of course. With feed costs going up, do you have any natural alternatives for cattle, goats, pigs, chickens, or sheep? I don't understand kind of the question, because you mean compared to alfalfa and like orchard grass and that? Is that what you mean, Travis? Grains. Any natural alternatives for grains? Well, I can tell you that if you graze, I don't know where you're at, and I apologize, but it's okay. And I don't know what species you have, but maybe you have all of them. If you can graze taller prior to the plants going to head, you're going to have more energy. Down in New Zealand, and maybe some people are on from New Zealand, I don't know, I don't think so, but they graze pretty darn short, and you never want to be grazing pasture that's not taller than the hooves of your animals. That's just not good. So but it's very proteinaceous, and they like that. But the more you can graze tall, the higher the bricks content will be. Also, grazing later in the afternoon when the photosynthesis is happening is a good thing too, because the bricks will be higher, which is the energy and the sugars. Okay, you're in South Central Virginia. hopefully that helps a little bit. As far as getting energy into the animals, we don't feed any grain on our farm. We do feed, we call them molasses chips. We're not certified organic, so we get molasses that's set on soybean hulls, I believe. And it's one of the things where we kind of cut the corner a little bit on the organic costs. We do feed our poultry and hogs all certified organic feed. We don't spray anything. We don't spray any of our forages, our marshmallows that we make, but on that supplement we do. So molasses, okay. Pigs notably tear up pastures, so we harvest pasture for them. What flora can be added for dried winter feeding? Well, they tear up pasture if they're on it too long. Generally, Joel Salatin has a formula that it's when you have, let's say, a herd of pigs, let's say 20 pigs, not just 2 or 3, but for every half ton you feed, you move them when you feed the next half ton. And so, yes, they can rip up pastures, but they also do a great job of plowing pastures, if you will. Pigs are like biological plows. Chickens are like biological discs and harrows, and cows are like biological mowers, and same with sheep and goats. Let's see. I think, let's see. I'm gonna go one more here. Any flea, tick, or deworming suggestions for livestock guardian dogs? Well, I'll tell you what we do with our dogs is, you're gonna ask, okay, Larissa, you're saying something there.
Oh no, I'm just, I was just saying that we're going to answer that live, what you're doing.
Okay. So what we do, actually, we feed raw meat to our dogs and our cats. We have 8 house cats, we have 5 house dogs, and we have 8 field dogs, and we have 3 barn cats, and they all get fed raw food. And I'll just say, without naming any names, and it doesn't matter, because all grocery chains have cast off meat. And I'll tell you, man, that it's really horrible to think about that, you know, animals are, and it can be conventional what we get. It's usually outdated, not always. I'll get to my point in a second, but it's amazing when you think about all the animals that are raised in captivity, we'll say, like conventionally, and you know, they're conceived in captivity, they're born in captivity, or concentrated animal feed operations. They're raised in it, they are sent off to slaughter, they're butchered, they're packaged, and then, you know, that package is outdated by a day or whatever, or the store gets rid of it and it's just tossed in a landfill. That's just like not right. And so we feed, we somehow or another, we got a line on one of these grocery chains that they also, to reduce their carbon footprint in the dumps, they get some awards for doing that if they keep it less than 10% of their stream of stuff. And so we get every 2 weeks meat. We put it in a freezer, and our dogs, when they go to the local vet, the small animal vet, and I can't do everything, so I take our pets to the local vet, they have not yet come up with heartworm, and we're in a strong heartworm area. And my wife, Suzanne, thinks that, and also they don't get ticks. Fleas, they don't really get, maybe some ear mites are what we deal with, actually. But she thinks it's just from the raw meat diet, because we're feeding them more like Mother Nature intended them to eat. So hopefully that answers that question a little bit. So the, you know, closer you can feed animals to the way they would eat, the better teeth they're going to have. And I'll just tell you, I think that like the whole dental thing in small animal medicine is like a crock. Like it's a major moneymaker in small animal medicine now. And, you know, if you can feed your animals, your dogs and cats and whatever, more like they would eat like a wolf or a tiger, they're going to be better in general in the GI tract, their hair coat, their immune system, their teeth, everything. So I want to get on to grazing and internal parasites. Here you can see some calves. You can see that one calf up front, which has diarrhea and it looks kind of runty. This is a picture from Janet McNally, who does great articles in the Graze magazine, which is a dairy-oriented grazer magazine. But anyway, she always has articles in there for, pardon me, for years now. And you can see, if you see that, that's like guaranteed that that animal is going to be heavily burdened with parasites. So what you want to do is take a look at, the I'd like to X that off here for a second, Larissa. Just for a minute. There we go. So I can see it myself. In veterinary school, we're always taught how to treat the animal. So like, what are we going to inject into it under the skin? What are we going to give to it in the mouth just to like take care of the problem? Well, the whole problem is not all in the animal. I mean, and I think we all know that. They shed those eggs that you can see off the back end of the animal there. They get out in the pasture, and if the conditions are right, like they are now, it's like 78 here and green and moist, and just rained last night, nice and lightly. Those eggs are going to hatch, and then those little larvae are going to be going up the grass blades a little bit, but staying shaded. Okay, and so that's why if you graze taller, the animals don't eat as far down. And anyway, that's a little dewdrop there on the left-hand side about 9 o'clock on the screen, showing about, I don't know, 50 little larvae that are waiting to be eaten again by that animal, where they're going to mate inside the stomach and create more problems. So, it's an ecology type thing. One Amish guy, actually a young guy, said, I was like amazed. He said what he does with his young stock when he weans them, he'll put them out to pasture for 2 or 3 days, take them away for a month, and then put them back out. And I thought, man, that guy should get a PhD in farm immunology, because he basically is vaccinating, if you will, or challenging the animals in a very light way, giving them time to recover and get an immune response, and then putting them back out. So anyway, in most dairy cattle and beef cattle, this is not true for sheep and goats, from weaning to a year old in cattle will look kind of crummy unless you feed them really well, and you can stay ahead of parasitism, internal parasitism, by feeding really well. That's just true. But if not, by a year old, even if they're not looking that great, they usually start looking good again, because their IgE antibody levels have gotten normal and they can live in balance with them. Whereas sheep and goats, for some reason, I don't know why, that's not the case. And they're constantly being hammered by parasites, it seems. We have those problems. We treat therapeutically. We don't do it like, every 2 months we treat them. But when we're trimming hooves, we'll see how they are. We'll feel their ribs. We'll look at their eye socket. We'll look at their back end and treat based on those symptoms. Otherwise, we try to graze tall, like here. And this is Janet McNally again. And like I said, the larvae reside in the lower parts of the grass. So like horses, they graze pastures because they're not normally moved in their grazing right down to the ground, and they get really bad infections too with parasites. So you can see why you want to rest your pastures as long as you can before you put the animals back out there. One, you're going to have higher energy forage, and two, they're not going to be as exposed to the parasites as they are in that lower picture. Oh yeah, this is something I came to realize is basically, you think about some of the documentaries you see on TV, like in Africa, you see the bird or 2 birds on a rhino pecking at the tick or whatever it is. but birds almost always follow mammals on in pastoral type settings. So that's what you really should do, because those birds will scratch apart the manure from the cattle. They'll expose it so it breaks down easier. The parasites will dry up and be desiccated. And Suzanne, my wife, says that you should wait 3 days actually before you put them out there. One reason, and it's very true, is the dung beetles are doing their thing in the first day or 2 or 3, but then she thinks that that the birds kind of can hear kind of a vibration or a humming or whatever it is of the insects that are in there. Let's say some fly larvae, maggot, type activity, and then the chickens go in there and they, eat that. And then, the pigs have them rooting. They're just biological plows, have chickens follow them again, and then then rest your pastures for a good 3, 4, 5 months if you can, and then you can have cattle out there. Now that's a true grazing operation there, but just for the concept of we've in the woods here in Saxball, Alamance County, North Carolina, we've had pigs, and where the pigs have rooted, if we let it go 3 or 4 months, it's amazing, because in the soil seed bank, there's ryegrass, and ryegrass just volunteers, green as can be, thick green. And we put cows in there a few months after the pigs have been there, and it's free feed. I don't know if any of the other North Carolina people have noticed that ever, but we have here. And, just keep moving the animals, Now, fencing needs are going to be different for each species, or you're going to need livestock guardians. For our sheep, we actually keep yearling heifers with them, which work perfectly. And for our eggmobile, we have about 300 birds in that. We keep one guardian dog out there, and he's got a bad leg from getting hit by a car, so he doesn't run off too much like a lot of the Great Pyrenees do. But fencing to keep predators out and to keep your sheep in, or your goats in, they're even more tricky, is really incredibly important. And what we do in the fencing, we've trained our sheep actually to double poly wire with the posts that we put in instead of the sheep netting, because that sometimes gets really hard to put up and take down. And for those animals that have gotten constantly the ones getting out through the double poly wire, they get culled. So anyway, something on the fencing always to keep in mind. And there you have some nice healthy sheep that don't have diarrhea. So here's some ways to look at approaching internal parasites. One is with the forages, like I showed way back earlier, with the monkey eating, and the cow eating from the tree, the monkey eating from the tannin plant. Bird's foot trefoil has higher tannins. If you have a heavy clay, wet soil, it's hard to establish, but it's very persistent. Up at the University of New Hampshire, where I went to school for college, I remember seeing bird's foot trefoil when we had to identify plants for agronomy class. I went there a bunch of years ago by now, and they have an organic dairy, and that bird's foot trefoil is still there without replanting. Chicory, grazing chicory is a nice one as well. Dung beetles, of course. Vermitox is a nice wormer that's all natural, probably has neem in it, I think, and some other good herbal ingredients. The problem is that you've got to get it into the animal directly, but you give that once a day for 3 or 4 days, and it has been shown to give equivalent results as ivermectin in reduction of internal parasites compared to doing nothing. Maybe I have a slide on that, I'm not sure. Pastured poultry, as I mentioned, I just talked about for a little bit. Grazing and clipping, it has its purposes. I used to be really pro clipping and grazing, so it's an even return of the grass, but it also can be used if it's low enough where you can take chains behind a tractor to obliterate the manure, so it's exposed to the air and the sun and desiccates. The other thing that's kind of interesting is ferric phosphate. I think it's ferric phosphate. I can't see with all these taskbars here. but I think it is ferric chloride. Maybe it is ferric chloride. Anyway, it's allowed by the NOSB, National Organic Standards Board, National Organic Program, and strawberry growers use it, produce growers use it as a chemical line of defense in wet type areas, swampy areas, let's say where the snails are, against the snails that carry liver flukes. Liver flukes are not an easy thing to deal with. Sometimes there's some work from Egypt on liver flukes, and it has shown that myrrh, MYRRH, compounds can help against liver flukes in case you're in a damp, wet area. So these forages, if you can interplant some of these forages, as I just mentioned, the bird's foot trefoil and the chicory, they've been shown scientifically to decrease adult worms compared to white clover and ryegrass. That work was done in New Zealand, where white clover and ryegrass are the predominant forage crops, as they are in the Netherlands. Need the right soil type, Sulla, another plant, I think it is to the right there, increases the antibody titers and decreases adult stomach worms compared to straight up alfalfa. The Ostratagia circumcincta is a goat and sheep stomach worm. Sandfoin, a dry land legume there on the left, decreases the immature and the adult forms of homuncus and trichostrongylis, and Dictyocollis viviparus, that's a lungworm. So you can see here there are some, and there's a lot more research now showing that if you can interplant some of these things, you're going to have less parasite pressure, mainly due to tannins. Now you can't have it like Lespedeza. Goats will eat that, but cattle don't. You can't have too much of these plants necessarily, otherwise the animals won't eat the rest of the pasture. We actually plant raise crazy mix, cool season and warm season annuals, and that doesn't have any of these in there, but the whole idea is to have a diversity for the animals to do better. And if you can put some of these forages in, it works really well. So if you just look at like how many weeks typically from a nutritional standpoint, the optimum for protein and whatnot is about 4 weeks rest before you go back to it. 8 weeks will be nice and tall, plant recovery, the root systems are great. So, somewhere in between there is like still palatable and good regrowth for the pastures. Oh, here's a slide on the vermitox. That was a study done at Chico State by Cindy Daly and colleagues. And there's the ingredients, and basically showed that it's equivalent to the ivermectin. Ivermectin is no longer allowed for organic, just if you are certified organic, and dairy. It's just fenbendazole and cydectin is allowed, moxidectin. So if you're certified organic or not, but if you're certified organic and you're a meat producing producer, something like this vermitox, the forages that are high in tannins are really good. Garlic's excellent. Here, little studies showed in Holstein calves that garlic had no effect of altering the duration of cryptosporidia diarrhea, but in high doses did delay its onset. Well, if I can delay the onset of any problem, that's a good thing. So garlic with its sulfur in there is a really good idea to have in your diets of your young stock if you're having some diarrhea problems. And what's kind of interesting, we had one bull that we have a herd of bulls as well, Jersey bulls, and it had coccidia. I looked under the microscope, it's manure because I had diarrhea, and I gave it actually the standard conventional IV of the sulfamed or sulfadimethoxine treatment. And during that 3 days, I did it each of 3 days, that animal's breath was like it had eaten garlic. So I thought to myself, why on earth am I going to keep doing this when I can just use garlic? That's pretty cool. A little tip on is if you're going to use some of these oral drenches, to use just a touch of copper sulfate, even if you have sheep, to shunt the medicine into the abomasum. It basically re-enlivens the esophageal abomasal groove when they're like calves or lambs or kids. Even if they're adults, it'll shift things away from that big rumen of the animal to the abomasum directly where the bugs are, the worms. So if you can give just a little bit of copper sulfate, it's kind of a reflexive thing. And then you give the vermitox or whatever you want, garlic, cloves. So here's at Rodale when I had just started working there, and they had just started with pigs, and that's why I was working there, because wow, Rodale has pigs now. And these pigs were limit fed. They were fed twice a day by a guy by bucket. You can see the little waterer down here. And they were fed in these, troughs. And those pigs would just like jump on each other. And the guy who was feeding them said, yeah, I kind of like that. I like to see competition among the animals for feed. And I'm like, not in a farm animal setting. You want to have ample feed. So anyway, these animals were really parasitized by typical roundworms like sheep and goats and cattle are at weaning time. And I hadn't worked with pigs at all. I was 20 years a dairy cow veterinarian. And I was like, holy moly, what am I going to do? We're certified organic here, So of course, I started looking at herbal treatments that we put right in the feed. And this is a little log of the time that it took, but over about 2 weeks, feeding this regimen, those animals came through it without looking back. They looked great. The parasitism declined, and shortly thereafter, we started feeding out of a chore boy, like self feeder, ad lib feeder, and those animals could eat anytime they wanted to, and so the problem of the competition was gone. And the guy who was actually feeding the pigs was gone too. But anyway, so this here with the chamomile and the mallow and black walnut and wormwood, that was all put in the feed. There's a product that's not easy to get from Mississippi. It's made just from earth that water is percolated through, called Faro. That's the gallon jug there. If anyone's interested in the guy's number, it's a very low key family operation, but that stuff is really excellent against internal parasites as well. Very bitter to the taste, but animals actually will go for it by choice until they're better and the worm load is less. So there's my daughter already like 7, 8, 9 years ago, and there's the pigs after we treated them. And then they were being fed 3 times a day. I apologize. And then eventually they got to be a chore boy feeder. So flies, external parasites, you need a multi-pronged approach, just like you do the internal parasites, when we've used forages and chickens and good rotations and higher grazing. The main thing with flies is the more you can have your animals dry looking, the less the flies are going to be there. So that Holstein in the top there was in a farm where all those cows had lime, just good old field lime, calcium carbonate, poured over their backs with a large aspirin container with little holes on it, like a little shower head. And it was a hot, horrible, humid day, man. And I've been on other farms locally around there to do preg checks and all, and there's hardly a fly on those animals. And it was basically because they were clean and they were dry. And, all parasites of any type like warm and damp. And that's why it's tougher in the Southeast here with parasites. But, you just got to employ a lot of different approaches. So actually another kind of nice one, I don't know if you can see my hand little thing here since I'm sharing my screen, is this is iodine. And iodine, actually, I saw in Southern Virginia, a dairy farmer whose helper, when I asked him, I said, your cows don't have flies here. He said, what do you do? He said, well, his boss was spraying the cows' udders, after milking. And then he sprayed just some of the midline of the cow where the flies were, and they just dropped down and die. I thought, man, that's easy, that's cheap. And there's some really good botanical sprays that you can mix with oil, but you can mix this with oil as well. But not alone, that just takes care of what already exists. But these predatory flies are really good if you can seed them in very, very religiously, like every couple of weeks into manure patties. A little fly trap with pheromones in there below here that'll suck the flies in. Well, the flies go in. This here, we had we just bought one from up in friends of mine at Seven Stars Farm. They couldn't get horned cattle in here and never used it. They couldn't figure out how, so we have a fly vac. So this side here blows off the flies as the cows walk through, and then this here sucks them up into a bag and just takes them out of action. So there's other kinds of fly reduction methods here as well. This here was interesting. This solar powered little barrel that gets a little, the animal gets a little spray of the ectophyte or whatever you want to use when it sticks its head in the barrel for some salt. Parasites, mange and lice, it happens in the wintertime, especially. What do you do? Sulfur works, tobacco dust works, Vaseline, calendula, anything to smother or kill those mites and lice is helpful. So here's some pig ear lice. I think this was at Rodale maybe, and you can see the eggs, the little nits that'll hatch out. But these, first we sprayed it with iodine, as you can see, the discoloration with the yellow. And then and it would kill the actual adult lice that you can see there pretty well. But then we started just putting on like a fair amount of calendula ointment, and that suffocated them. And of course, you have to do it for a whole week because those nits will hatch out and become adults at some point. So how do we deal with diarrhea in adult ruminants? Doesn't matter if it's a sheep, a goat, a cow, or water buffalo. Just feed them dry hay for about 4 to 5 days. If you want to add in some oats, rolled oats are great, but oats are a great, when I say, by the way, just feed them dry hay. Take them off pasture. Don't feed any baleage. If you are feeding baleage, just feed them dry grass hay. Best stuff you got. And then also you can feed oats. Oats are a good regulator in that it helps slow down the gut if it's going too fast, and it helps speed up the gut if it's going too slow. And then some kind of probiotic as well. So for calf diarrhea, it happens, and we've had to deal with it here. But here's some plants that you can use. This is really, hey, Larissa, how do I get rid of that taskbar? It's always, I keep thinking I'm the only one seeing it.
You are the only one seeing it, I think.
Okay, that's cool. So the mallow and the slippery elm, you can see those words okay? Yeah, okay. And the other thing is what we do, we milk once a day. We calf share, as I think I mentioned. So calves are on the cows up to 5 and 6 months when the boys and girls have to be separated. But oftentimes we'll have calves that are starting to drink a lot of milk at about 2 weeks old, get scours. And then Suzanne has this protocol where for 1 day, 24 hours, those calves are separated from the mom and only given Resorb or electrolytes, whatever you want to use. And then once they've stopped scouring, they can have their mother back after the mom is milked in the morning. So they're not getting a whole lot of milk. They're with her during the day, and they're separated again at night if needed. And that's a 7-day protocol. And then they graduate to being with mom all the time if the scours are gone. Tonic for horses and cattle, something I've created called Eat Well, which is some horse vets love this to avoid surgery from colic, but it's got herbal strength gentian, herbal strength nux vomica, which used to be in a lot of cattle medicine, and ginger and sodium bicarb. this Get Well. I use that a lot, and a lot of people use it. Pardon me for 1 second. Let me just plug in my computer. There we go. It's got the garlic in there, and you've seen that some signs about that: ginseng, golden seal, echinacea, barberry. And we use that on any cow, any calf, any sheep we have that has mysteriosis. We don't know what's going on. If they have some kind of fever, and we'll give that, a couple times a day for a few days until they're better. And then if they're like sick, if it's a cow, we'll actually put about 60 to 90 cc's in a bottle of dextrose and IV it into them. I wouldn't recommend that for sheep and goats, but I would just give it orally. And, one thing with natural treatments is you've got to kind of be on it early on and more frequently than you might with a once a day antibiotic shot or something like that. So even though there's some more labor involved, hopefully you're getting more for your product when you're using the natural treatments and farming alternatively. Here's a table for different kind of preparations. A lot of people will use tinctures right down here, last line, or even a tea. And so these are the doses that come out of this book here. And treatment for ketosis or pregnancy toxemia in sheep and goats, or ketosis in cows before they kid or lamb or after they calve. This ketonic is a really good one for, it's got various herbs in it like milk thistle, dandelion, celandine, and molasses, apple cider vinegar. If you really need to IV them because they're really low on it and they're really cold and out of it, dextrose, you can give IV, of course. National Organic Program has since allowed propylene glycol. So glycerin, even though they like glycerin better, all animals do, you can use propylene glycol as well. Let's see. High somatic cell count and early mastitis. If you milk sheep, you milk goats, you can use this at doses for cows. And it's actually based on somewhat on an old British vet named Dr. Alexander that would take, and you can do this yourself if you want without using or buying that product there. And I have no commercial connection to agrodynamics. If you take the animal's milk and you re-inject it, now a cow would get 20 cc's, but maybe a goat or a sheep would get 5. And you re-inject it into the same animal under the skin every other day for 5 times, it can, at least they did in Britain, saw that strep ag could be cleared without antibiotics, and they didn't have antibiotics back then. So that's an interesting way to do things. You also can get vaccines made up for pink eye from your own animals or from mastitis milk by Addison Labs or Newport Labs, which I would recommend over commercial vaccines because it will be very specific for your own animals. So that milk injection is kind of like a autogenous vaccine into the own animal. A lot of other lotions, mint, basically. Phytomast, here we go. This is a product that I've developed over the years. Keenan Mullen there pictured. It got the first PhD in the United States to get a PhD in the herbal treatment of mastitis. And these are scientific articles reviewing Phytomast. And actually, I think we might start having it in screw cap bottles because some inspectors are not enjoying seeing tubes that don't have full FDA approval. So we're probably going to have it in screw cap bottles as well. Last couple slides here, folks. If any of your animals have udder edema, you can use coffee. Don't cook it. You can use the cheapest stuff available, Maxwell House, whatever you want. Make sure it's caffeinated, and you can give it in pill form to them, and they will urinate just like people do, and they will drop off their urine fluid buildup, as you can see on these animals here. Calendula ointment is just amazing. You know, scrapes like this that aren't life-threatening, and this here was such bad edema that this on the left-hand side, we treated that with hydrogen peroxide 3% twice a day for a couple days, just 2 days. Otherwise, if you use peroxide too much, it can actually hinder healing. And then the guy put on calendula ointment on that, and that udder healed up perfectly. And I don't have a picture of that right now. I do though, but you couldn't tell that anything happened. Foot rot, what you want to do is basically, and this would be for sheep and goats too, without doubt, make the rotted area, just make a shallow paring out and make it bleed, so you get new you get new circulation to the area. Again, use either peroxide or tea tree oil right topically on it, and then use a mix of sugar and betadine or just straight honey, wrap it up and rewrap it again 2 days later, 3 days later, and it's amazing how that works. There you go. You can see after one treatment, it's pretty amazing. Okay, I believe this last slide, if you aren't seeing any heats out of your animals, this product here, Heat Seek with female botanical herbs, if you will, helps the animal come into heat in the follicular phase, and does not dump out a uterus, isn't good against short cycling animals, but will help animals show heats, behavioral heats that you can then breed on or put them with a ram or whatever. I mean, rams and they generally get them, but in dairy cows, not seeing heats is a big thing. Uterine infections, I use just iodine pills. Basically, you can infuse this Utricept, which has aloe in it, or you can even just infuse dextrose. I've done, I don't know how many different bad uterine infections. In goats and sheep, it'd be a little bit tough, but there's 3 parts of dextrose to 1 part of iodine, up to about 55 mils every other day. You can see here, it depends on the size. And that has helped a lot of animals become fertile again. So I will, what time is it here? We got 5 minutes or so, Larissa?
That sounds great, Hugh. If you want to stop sharing your screen, it makes it a little easier to for you to see what's actually going on. I realize that screen sharing is kind of
it's an interesting thing.
I know it is. And
trying to.
Well,
okay.
You know what I can do is I can share my screen and take it over from you.
Go for it. And I see there's about 20 questions. So let's see. What do we got? What do you got coming at me?
I'll give you time. I'll give Hugh just a moment to let me view this, to read through the questions. I want to tell folks that we are going to be sending out a link to this recording in the next day or so. So keep an eye out for that. I know there was a question about that and the slides. And well, you're still on the line, I'm going to run this really quick poll for folks. Actually, I put this here. To see, let's see, just to give us your feedback while Hugh is taking a breather. So just 2 questions. Let us know what you think, and I will put my video back on. And Hugh, if there are some questions you want to take, there's a couple I think that that go together. There's a couple that came in into the chat bar as well, but that look like they might be covered in the Q&A. I know folks were wondering where to get the get well items that you were mentioning. Yeah.
Just go here, you know, unashamed self-promotion, but drkarreman.com.
And they're over the counter?
Yep, everything is, yep.
Yep. All right. So I'll be sure to put a link into the follow-up email as well.
You know, I'm looking at the question on what concerns should I have about high iron in my well water? Could it be binding and causing absorption problems of copper in my fiber goats? What about impacts on other animals? It absolutely could be. As a matter of fact, after my open heart surgery, they were giving me iron, and my wife was like, no, 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 you don't need that. And I'm like, what? And she's, no, you need copper. And so it absolutely, having high iron in a well could hinder copper uptake in goats. And I wish she was sitting here right now, because she's got something on sheep and copper, and how they actually can use more copper than thought. Oh, okay. I am looking at planting trees and shrubs into our cool season pasture. That's good.
Oh, Hugh, are you still there? Hello, Hugh? Uh-oh. It looks like you.
So that one of them makes it. He said, but if you, well, for pecans, you need to graft them with some other tree. And if you don't, you'll just have smaller pecans from the natural growth that you do get. But those forages, it's not forages, that's not the right word. Can't think of the right word, but we're actively doing that. We tend to create pasture out of the woods. You might be more south than us, and we're putting trees into pasture. That's great. Hershey honey locust, got to watch it with elderberry. You could do it with oak. It can be high in tannins sometimes. Willow is a real good one. My wife and I were just looking at willow plantings that we put in November. They're doing well with the elderberry that we accidentally planted. So go for it. What about rabies and lepto for herd shared dairy cows? Yes or no? Oh, you mean vaccines? I see. Hold on. I have been homeopathic for 25 years and prefer no vaccines. You are a lot like Suzanne. And I got to say that the only two vaccines that I really believe in, or that, I've been a vet since 1995, so that's about the same time frame you're talking about there, Linda, is rabies, to be honest, and the intranasal vaccine for shipping fever to prevent that in ruminants. And by the way, just in general, if you vaccinate, if one vaccinates, you should vaccinate in the manner that the natural route of transmission would be. So if there's a pneumonia vaccine, you would want it in the nose as a spray, let's just say, like, aerosolized. If it's rabies, let's say, you would want it as a puncture, kind of like to mimic the bite. If you had it for salmonella, I know they have injectable vaccines, but you would want it orally for an oral, if that makes sense. So kind of mimicking the natural route of infection would be important. So I'll just say that, like, dairy cows in general, I don't know where you're at. I think Vermont, they vaccinate for rabies, but generally they don't. I don't know if you've had a lot of rabies vectors nearby, if you're in a sylvatic wooded area. Lepto, I'm not too worried about. I would be checking your milk for raw milk if that's what you're doing. It sounds like for herd share dairy cows. One thing we've checked when we were doing pet milk here in North Carolina, we're not doing that anymore. We're shipping to a creamery, a cheese making creamery nearby. Anyway, we always check for salmonella. E. coli, Listeria, and what's the fourth one? Campylobacter. They're the four big ones you really got to check for, like milk. Okay, just so you know. How do you control external parasites? Used parasitic flies for 25 years and they did not work well in the past 2 years. Ticks are a big problem here. Natural heritage dairy and sheep in Virginia. Guinea fowl or tick eating machines. Yes, just having chickens around is why we probably don't have ticks on our animals. That's what Suzanne thinks, and I would agree. How about the use of natural oils and vinegar for poultry infections? Hey, Suzanne, can you help here for a second? Just, we're on the last few questions. I don't know if you can see Suzanne. This is Suzanne coming in.
Hi, Suzanne.
What's your treatment for poultry and botulism? Not that that was a question, but
a 50-50 drench of apple cider vinegar and molasses, like every few minutes, because poultry, and because birds have such high metabolisms, they can like go down quick and they can recover quick. So I found that to be effective for botulism. But what else about poultry?
Here's how about the use of natural oils and vinegar for poultry infections like pox and intestinal parasites? It worked with my poultry. What say you?
I think it can, when before the animals are demonstrating clinical like signs of depression, lack of eating, those kinds of things. The other thing that can be really effective for poultry is spices. A friend of mine taught me many years ago to put, when poultry were challenged by something, to make like a really spicy mix, like cayenne pepper and red pepper flakes and things of that nature, and mix it with olive oil and like offer it to them free choice. And they did indeed eat it. They were obviously after the fat. Chickens can't taste, from what I understand, they can't taste spice, but spice is, as you may well know, in many species can be very therapeutic. For example, you can use cayenne pepper to stop bleeding. It also can stop a heart attack. It can stop a stroke.
It helped me out with my heart problems.
It's a really useful thing. But because like our limiting factor is that we don't like to eat it in massive amounts, but birds, from my understanding, don't taste it like we do. So you can use relatively high doses of spicy things for poultry to deal with a variety of ailments, including digestive things and parasites.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I got helped out there.
I know. Do you want to take about two more, Hugh? I know that we'll probably have to wrap up, but we can.
Okay. What about using food grade diatomaceous earth for treatment of worms or nicotine? Well, the Germans used to use nicotine in very, very small amounts. You got to be real careful with that. And I wouldn't recommend that. Now, if you're talking about external parasites and nicotine, yes. Tobacco dust, just the stuff they sweep up off the floor after they put the bales together, the tobacco before they bring it. That's good, like for the mange itch at the top of the tailhead. As far as using food grade DE, or even if it was medical grade DE, for all I know, that was a wave that came and went in Lancaster County over a few years' time, because honestly, it didn't do diddly if the actual, like the animals were really parasitized. Like some of the animals I showed, the calves on that very first slide, like DE just doesn't cut it. Used as a tonic, kind of like pulsed every, week or so, 2 weeks, it can help keep things in balance. But if they really are parasitized, you got to use stronger things than DE. I can't really answer the suggestion any with the Merrick's and chickens. I'm sorry, except the vaccine, but you probably aren't vaccinating. How do you feed the eggs for scours? Right in the the large in the solution that you're feeding them. With rotational grazing, the animals get little to no exercise. Sorry, my screen keeps jumping down. Any concerns with this? No, I think they get exercise better than barns. I guess I don't understand that question, maybe. Is poison ivy effective as a wormer for beef cattle? Not that I've ever heard, but my wife, who was just speaking, likes to drink milk from cows that have been nibbling poison ivy, because once they process it, then it kind of gives maybe quote unquote antibodies in the milk. But I don't know it as a wormer, to be honest. Maybe it is. If you're moving your animals for pasture on a weekly basis, what size, density wise, and how many pastures are ideal for rotations? Wow. I don't know. That's not a, there's no cookie cutter answer to that. And someone already answered that. But hopefully you got to see that, like, well, on a weekly basis. Hopefully you're not going back to the same paddock for, 6 weeks, at least 4. What size and how many pastures are ideal for rotations? And you don't want to basically leave half, take half, leave half is one philosophy for a pasture. So, how much do you take from the pasture? Boy, we could talk a while on that. I apologize, but someone else did answer for you there. My dogs have always wanted to munch on cracked corn while doing barn chores. I actually find grain-free to be a joke. My previous dog, Husky Lab mix, lived to be 17 years. My 2 dogs now are 14 and 16 years, hound mixes. Nice ages. I have always fed the cheapest dog food, previously Old Roy, Walmart, now Good Friends, Rural King. Well, good. I'm glad. I mean, obviously, something in your environment is keeping those dogs happy and healthy. Good. I know I talked about feeding the animals as close to Mother Nature as possible, and we feed raw meat. I'm glad for you that works. I can just tell you that for a lot of people, the bagged food for the dogs that are inside all their whole life is a recipe for disaster. How long would you keep a cow and a few goats in a pasture before rotating? I have 2 acres of pasture and we are going to fence it off to rotate. So how large should each be? And how long should they stay on one spot? Again, take half, leave half. You might be keeping them on. You got 2 acres of pasture. You keep 1 cow and a few goats. You got a fair amount of pasture. I would just subdivide it into about 10 different paddocks. That's all I can say on that, and watch how your growth is. Vermitox compatible with maintaining dung beetles? I believe it is. That hasn't been answered or asked to be answered, in a science experiment. Does anyone here use Vermitox on their sheep? Any concern with the copper? Oh, let me see. Hold on. Hey, Sue, can you come up here for a second about copper and sheep? Good question there. Larissa, let's just do one more and then Suzanne will be up here about the copper and sheep issue, okay?
Sounds good.
Would love more information on the Pharaoh product for swine. Here you go. Ready? I'm going to look it up on my phone right now. Can you just talk to the group about like your thoughts on sheep and copper?
Well, primarily copper is a really important immune mediating mineral. We need it too, a lot more than we get it. And you can fix a lot of things by having adequate copper. I think one of the reasons why sheep are always so deficient in copper is because the mineral mixes have stopped including copper at all because of the possibility of toxicity. Obviously, an excess copper can be toxic to the point of being fatal to sheep. But I found that when they have adequate copper, and if they can choose it free choice, they will often deal with, I'm going to say, mild intestinal parasite issues with that alone. I wouldn't use that as the exclusive way of dealing with intestinal parasite issues if they were severely challenged. But I one time bought a group of sheep. I thought they just didn't look great. And I thought they probably were wormy, but they weren't terrible. And I used the Pat Colby method. She talks about this in her book, Natural Sheep Care, and putting copper sulfate in water in a water tub next to the regular water. It's very important that they also have regular water to drink. And the other important thing is that magnesium sulfate antidotes copper excess. And so regular old like dolomitic lime, free choice mixed with sulfur next to that, like in a dry bin, allowed them to, they would choose to drink the copper water if they wanted. And they did. They would drink that water dry and leave the other one for a few days. Then if they got into a point of excess, they could go and lick the magnesium and the sulfur. And I didn't have any dye, and they looked a lot better. The other thing we've done over the years with copper and sheep is we had, for many, many years, we worked with the Free Choice Enterprises 20 bin cafeteria style mineral program. And copper sulfate was one of the minerals that was in the 20 bin system that was allowed free choice. And we run our sheep with our cattle. And so the cattle had free access to that. And they self-selected. I definitely saw them eating copper. And we never had a copper fatality from it. And we never saw any sign of copper excess. I will say that certain breeds of sheep are more copper sensitive than others. But sometimes I just went with the innate wisdom that the animal had to select, and I was willing to deal with the possible downsides of doing that. But I think the lack of copper in sheep minerals is a problem, and I think one of the reasons why goats and sheep have so much parasitism.
Thanks. All right.
Thanks, Suzanne.
one last how fine must black ground walnut shells be ground to be effective? They can be cut and sifted. They don't have to be powder. That's okay. And then last question here, what about using DE as a topical treatment for fleas and ticks? Yep, absolutely, go for it. That would be better than using it for internal parasites. Okay.
Awesome. All right.
Oh, I got one thing. One more information on the Pharaoh product for swine. Here's the number. The guy's name is Lee Eason, Eason. His number down in Mississippi is 601-670-1458. 601-670-1458. And with that, let's wrap it up.
That's
Melissa.
right. Thank you, Hugh, and Suzanne, of course, for her cameos. Let me just do a little bit of housekeeping before we sign off. We still have quite a few folks on the line, so thanks for sticking around. I know that we didn't get to everyone's questions, but possibly we can have another session at some point with Hugh on these. There was a lot that we went over today, so it'd be awesome. Yeah.
One quick thing. The recipe for worms could not be used for horses, correct? That is correct. That's got black walnut in there. Do not use that for horses. Thank you. Good point. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I'm done.
You're like, you don't want to kind of get that, that advice in there. But anyways, I appreciate having you here, Hugh, and sharing all this. It was wonderful, really great session, and hopefully we can continue the discussion in the future. We're taking a hiatus right now on our webinars, probably until the fall, because I know folks are very busy getting outside as it's starting to get nice again. But I will be scheduling a lot more things for the next fall and winter. So I will be sending out an email later today with links to the slides, the recording, and some of the other resources that Hugh mentioned. So folks have that for their records. And otherwise, I just want to say thanks again, Hugh. It's been a real honor and a pleasure for you to take the time to be with us. It's a real special session I'm glad we could put together, and that we have a chance to collaborate again. And then to everyone out in the audience, thank you very much for your interest and your attention, and just trying to learn how to do things in a way that works for your operation and for your animals and for where you live as well. So thank you for everyone's work and commitment and efforts and energy. So I hope that Any final words or last words?
No,
Okay.
I enjoyed this and hope we can do it again sometime.
I hope so
Different
too.
topic.
Yeah. so many topics to choose from. So everyone have a great rest of your day, great rest of your week, and that we can connect soon. So goodbye for now. Bye-bye.
Bye.